Aquilo, Season 2, Chapter 15, The Most Fatal of Attractions. There's a demon at the door. It's not the first time this exact situation has happened. Last fall, one came crashing through the front window and knocked the chimes off the ceiling at the entrance. 2 nights ago, I let another one in, out of pity. Tonight, I brought the demon to my threshold. I invited him with a tempting menu of his own victims. I made the Aquilo Cafe into the busiest place in town. It's a veritable buffet of past meals for the demon, but they're only here for my own benefit. They're here because I knew they'd come if I healed them from the harm they'd already suffered. I knew he'd come because the demon hungers, and so far this has been the place where he's prowled to find his meals. Here, or the Lady Godiva, or Chez Décembre. But those other places are closed. The demon lusts. I can smell the honey and rose at the same time I hear the door chimes announcing his arrival. It reminds me of Agnes conjuring up the same blush every time she crosses my mind. But I know it's not her. There's something definitely masculine about the scent. Whatever infernal pheromones are currently wafting through the air have an almost physical presence. I turn to look, and sure enough, there's Peter. His walk is the same cocksure stride from that first day he came in and time stopped for him. Again, his hands are in his pockets, showing he's got nothing to fear from the likes of us mortals. I'm a little disappointed. After his threat, I thought he might have shown up with wings unfurled and horns protruding from his forehead. Instead, he's wearing black, sun-bleached jeans and a white short-sleeved shirt. His raven hair looks a little damp, like he just ran here or got caught in the rain. His smile is that of a wolf. Teeth exposed, and with the confidence of a predator, he looks around at all the familiar faces. Minute twitches of his lips hinted a memory hard at work savoring past misdeeds. I shudder to think what he's done to some of these people, but with this moment of trembling comes the burning fury of righteous anger. The palms of my hands get damp as I struggle to resist his aura. My mind sees him for the monster he is, but my body betrays me with sweat and profusion and a heartbeat like the engine of Gulliver's truck. Agnes is right. He has been holding back. If what I experienced before was Peter restrained, then this is going to be a completely different experience, and I'm not sure I can handle it. The clients of the Aquilo, however, are far less impressed. Most remain indifferent to the incubus's arrival. Ian and his followers don't even bother to interrupt their conversation to pay him heed. An older woman casts a glance over her shoulder, shocked and nervous at what she sees. Ilias Payne keeps his eyes on the outside, riveted by the still life of Rue Principale. Patrick is the most agitated, but instead of the animal attraction we all lavished over Peter every time he walked through these same doors, Pat pulls away from the table, scrambling backwards to distance himself from the demon. There is so much terror in his eyes that for a second, I wonder if he sees Peter for what he is. This isn't what Peter expected. It's not what he signed up for when he walked in. The flat mirror calm he normally wears is disturbed by ripples, like the surface of a lake when rain begins to fall. His beautiful features contort into a parody of themselves. Anger and annoyance befoul his perfect face, making him ugly with rage and petulant resentment. That's right, Peter. How dare these people resist your charms? What gall do they have to recoil from your presence? My own anger still burns, stoked even hotter at Pat's reaction. Whatever the demon has done to him must have hurt. I keep the reins of my imagination held tight, lest I start to fantasize as to what horrors Peter forced onto him. Yet, I smile. I smile because my lemon bars are a complete success. This isn't about my prowess as a baker. Well, not just because of that. It's the satisfaction that my clients and friends are indeed inoculated against the demon's charm. Memories may be slow to coalesce completely before them, but without their minds and bodies in the thrall of Peter, they remember enough to be afraid. Or indifferent. Whichever infuriates the incubus most is immaterial. It's working. No one here is going to give him any of the affection and intimacy he needs to feed his lust. He'll go hungry unless he finds another target. And I've made sure to leave him only one. Me. I don't gussy myself up too often, especially these days. I've been too busy with the Aquilo to worry about my love life, and maybe I've let myself go in the fancy grooming department. However, what I've done makes me so much more irresistible than any amount of makeup or perfume could accomplish. I clean up all right when I put in the work, but no skill with the hairbrush or blush compares to what I can do in the kitchen. You. The dining room disappears from Peter's notice. There's no longer anything for him there. Nothing he can take from people who have nothing to give him. Me, I confirm with a smug smile, tossing my hair for effect. What have you done? I picked up the gauntlet you threw down. You said I was powerless to stop you, and for a time, I thought you were right. But when you said that nothing my great-grandaunt had written could stand up to you, that's when I knew you were wrong. Peter's frown deepens, but the added frustration doesn't last long. His features soften again, and his smile returns. He pulls his hands from his pockets and holds his palms up in the universal gesture of an apology. Well, well, he says, stepping forward to the counter. I suppose I owe you an apology, then. Seems I've underestimated the Dufour legacy. I don't like this. We shouldn't both be smiling. At this point, one of us should be losing, and I fear that it might actually be me, but that I've yet to notice. Did I miscalculate something? Misjudge what I was up against? I've never gone against a fully rested and fed demon before. Apology not accepted. Maybe I am losing. Maybe I did miss something vital, but I am sure as hell not going to let him know, and I'm going to keep weaponizing my confidence until the very end. Or until I know what he thinks he's got up his sleeve. It doesn't matter. Fake it till you make it. You know, he says, leaning over the counter, ignoring Olivia, who's but a few inches from him. I smelled you from across the border. I smelled you from inside my apartment. We've hung out before. I know your scent. But this is different, isn't it? I lean forward, getting to within an inch of his face. I can smell his honey breath, and I can see the flecks of brown in his golden eyes. The battle between his demonic aura and my aphrodisiac cooking rages in the air between us. It's a stalemate that manifests as a fiery tension that can only be released by bait. Olivia interrupts my thinking. She's using herself as bait. The breath catches in my throat and the heat drains from my veins. Why would she say that? Why would my best friend in Aquilo betray me like this? I thought whatever tension regarding Henry had been settled. If this is her idea of vengeance, Olivia is going too far. From the corner of my eye, I look at her and understand. Her deep brown eyes are riveted onto Peter, and I can imagine that everything else in her field of vision blurs. Her pupils are dilated, and her fingers fidget with the rim of her mug. Olivia betrayed me because she has no protection against Peter. The invisible mist of attraction that emanates from him like a miasma of unfettered passion has no problem taking hold and turning her from me. "Is that so?" Peter asks, his sing-song voice cooing at Olivia to strengthen his hold. "And for what kind of trap would your little friend volunteer as bait?" "I don't know," Olivia answers, putting her hand on Peter's arm. "Miriam, why don't you tell Peter what you're up to? Better yet, why don't you two make peace? He's such a nice guy." This is madness. Olivia sounds like an idiot child with her first crush. Every ounce of judgment seems to have been stripped from her. Of course, I'd be lying to pretend I didn't see how it was happening, though, and I'm terrified of the unwanted thoughts and ideas that pop into my head the longer I stay at close range. Fantasies I didn't even think myself capable of struggle to dominate my thoughts, and it's all I can do not to indulge them. When Agnes appeared on top of the dumpster 2 nights ago, that was the first time I even noticed she had that power. It took her adopting her true form for the force she wields to affect me. Peter still wears a human shape and is likely not at the height of his own powers. Maybe you're right, I say, taking a deep breath of rose and lavender and sweat. Here. I bend down and pull a couple of petit fours from the display. Clumsy and awkward, veins painfully throbbing with my rapid heartbeat, I put them on a plate. "Just a second. Let me make you some coffee, too. It's not much of a peace offering. You'll have to forgive me. I just haven't had time to bake anything except for the bait," he finishes. His voice, melodious and proud a moment ago, sounds like poison. It's still sweet, but in the way fermented fruit smells sweet, rotten and nauseating. "Except for the bait," I agree, "and a few cookies and cakes." This is where I find out if my gamble pays off. Instead of brewing Peter a cup of coffee as promised, I take the plate of petit fours and make my way to the back of the Aquilo. "Where do you think you're going?" He's irritated. The rest of Aquilo seems to have forgotten about Peter as a result of my lemon bars, but he thought he still held control. Olivia might be under his spell, but I resist. I want to tempt him further. I want to lure him away with some coy reply. "Oh, just out back," I could answer. Or I could turn and wink and say, "Why don't you come find out?" But there's no point. As I push the back door and step into the night, the sound of Peter's stool grinding on the floor finds me. He's coming. I made sure of that. It's a hot night, warm and dry in a way that bakes smell right out of the asphalt and concrete. There's little to no wind, so nothing to carry the life from the forest into the city. This is as close to Montreal as Aquilo ever feels. I usually don't have to walk in order to enjoy the tendrils of nature that reach out when I'm in Aquilo. The weather does that for me. Not tonight. I carry my cakes on their plate with both hands, crushing first pebbles under my soles, but soon the grass, and eventually twigs and leaves as I get further from the Aquilo Cafe. Peter will follow. He has to. I had no plans to leave him with a perfectly good meal back there. Olivia wasn't supposed to come back. She was mad at me and should have stayed home with Henry, safe and away from this nonsense. Or I should have offered her a lemon bar the moment she stepped through the door. Should have, could have, would have, but didn't. Now, either Peter will follow the honeypot out the door and into the dark forest, knowing full well that it's bait, and where there's bait, there's a trap. Or he'll stay behind and do whatever monstrous thing he sees fit to feed himself, and my friend Olivia is going to be his meal. It all hinges on the potency of my baking, something I've had lackluster results with over the last few weeks. My confidence has been shot, and it nearly cost me and Agnes our lives. Tonight is different. It'd be a stretch to say I'm sure of myself again. I haven't had that deep of a catharsis. What I have, however, is run out of options and time. It's not quite the same thing as confidence, but as long as I'm not second-guessing myself anymore, it's almost the same. Isn't it? Besides, I've also learned a few new tricks, and I have a brand new attitude towards this whole magic baking business. Desperation feeds the imagination. The smell of awful memories welcomes me to the edge of the forest. Moonlight and distant street lamps pick out the edges of lush ferns covering the undergrowth. Pines, maples, and oaks, along with the occasional birch, populate the woods here, and all are luxuriant after abundant sun and plentiful rain. Yet even their crisp fragrance isn't enough to mask the odor of burnt flesh that permeates the area. It could be my memory conjuring it up, but it seems even a full night of torrential downpour has failed to erase the smell of dead hellhound. "All right," I say, kneeling to put my plate of petit four on the forest floor. "Dinner is served. Come and get it." I step back from the plate. The petit four are freshly baked, still a little warm to the touch, and should be fragrant enough to attract their intended target. Hopefully, it's still hungry, having not fed since biting into the burning flesh of another monster. To each demon its own bait, and at least one of them is working. Rodents cease their rustling, and crickets stop their chirping. Even the occasional owl quiets down, afraid to be noticed. Death walks among them, and all the nocturnal wildlife know better than to attract attention. A shuffling of branches and leaves is the final harbinger of the hunger demon, announcing its arrival but a moment before it emerges from the shadows of dense vegetation and night. It's almost like watching an old friend walk through the door, a sight so familiar as to be coated with a thick layer of comfort. It's a lie, though, a candy shell over a cyanide pill. The creature has changed a little. Agnes didn't flee the fight without leaving a mark on the monster. Its left cheek is cut open, from the lips all the way to its earlobe. Skin flops around the demon's face like a torn sail caught in the wind. I can see the creature's blunt teeth chewing at the loose flesh, desperate to find sustenance. Fingers are missing from its right hand, leaving only the thumb and index, along with the long, sharp, dark claws at their tip. A horror, somehow made more horrible through the damage it's taken but cannot repair. And hanging over this spectacle of ruin, the stench of putrid decay still presides. "Hey there," I whisper, desperate to hear something other than the creature's moan. "You hungry?" It hears me, and it sees me, but more worrisome is that it can smell me. Its head bobs through the air, sniffing around in an attempt to understand the scent. I've made myself particularly fragrant this evening, but it should be nothing that tempts this demon's urges. Instead, I hope that something more familiar and delicious catches the monster's attention. Thankfully, it does. I sigh in relief as I see the particular dance repeat itself. This is how things should be, how they were. The hunger demon picks up on the smell of pistachio marzipan petit four, a delight that for the last 10 months has soothed its eternal hunger. It circles the plate for a moment before bending down to pick up the meal. "That's right," I say, watching the demon marvel at the presence of a second cake. "Today's a special day." I don't have to speak twice. The monster grabs both petit four, one in each hand, and stuffs them down its gullet. Guttural noises echo through the forest as it chews the soft sponge. A wad of crushed cake spills from the hole on the side of the monster's face, but it's quick to pick it up and force the food back in its mouth. It's a gross display of wet smacking and ravenous gurgles. Apart from fresh wounds, this is something I'm familiar with, and normally, at this point, magic would take over. The glyph I bake into the bottom of the petit four, inscribed on rice paper, along with the careful choice of ingredients and my own intent, manifest in a spectacle of light that heals the demon, if only for a short while. Tonight, instead, sodden, sticky cake drips down from the demon's unfinished trachea, falling to the ground. The monster panics and howls. It grabs at the cake falling from its own open abdomen and sends it back the same path again. It's no use. There's no magic in these petit fours, only the delicious smell of pistachio and sugar. There's no magic because I didn't put any. This was just an appetizer. Miriam, Peter's harmonious voice calls out from behind. Where do you think you're going, my pet? Ah, and here's the main course. There you are. Branches and ferns are pulled to the side, allowing Peter to step into the small clearing where I feed the hunger demon his meal. Last time I was here, I saw the beast tear down another demon for food. It was a brutal and traumatizing event. I'll likely carry the emotional scars of it for years to come. Already, it haunts my nightmares. And I want it to happen again. What's this, Miriam? Peter's voice carries both surprise and disappointment, though it loses none of its charm in the process. Each word plucks at the strings of my heart, also touching lightly on other, more private nerves in the process. Sweat, honey, and wine, with a hint of raspberry, clash against the rancid odor of the hunger demon, competing for dominance over my olfactory senses. One is alluring, while the other repulsive. Both are terrifying. Ah, I see. And here I thought you'd gone through the trouble of making yourself irresistible for my benefit. Foolish of me to hope that you were luring me into the woods to show me a specific tree, wasn't it? The hunger demon snaps its jaw at hearing Peter speak. It, too, can smell the aura of attraction he gives off, but the only thing a hunger demon wants is to feed. If the hellhound smelled of cooked flesh, like a steak or a roast, then I suppose Peter must smell of sweetness and dessert. Either way, bon appetit, my starving friend. I told you, I say, voice steady despite once again standing between two demons. There's no such thing as an aquilo tree. Peter's brow knits itself into a frown of exaggerated anger, all the while smiling from the corner of his mouth, as if this were a game to him. Oh yes, that little line you keep feeding me. But I know better. Hell, I bet even he knows better. He nudges his chin towards the hunger demon, and, for a moment, it pauses, as if it understood the conversation we're having. So what was your plan, Miriam? Cover yourself in magic perfume and hope I follow you here to kill your problem for you? Maybe get myself mortally wounded in the process? Is that how you hope to save Agnes from what she is? How pretentious! Trying to fit my sister into a mold that doesn't suit her. You think you're helping her? She's sick. She needs to accept what she is. Only then can she be saved. At least Peter is making it easier to resist his charm with every word he speaks. You know what? He continues. I think I'll change my plans. Why don't I let you get eaten, and I can go feed my own urges on your friend I left behind. Then I'll take my sister, and we'll go somewhere more welcoming to our kind. I'm not surprised by this turn of events. I anticipated that it might come to this. However, where the old Miriam would have fought against these circumstances, wondering how Doris might have handled them instead, I accept them for what they are. A moist snarl caresses the back of my ears and I tense, feeling the hunger demon get closer behind me. I've been stabbed by this beast before, and I've seen what it does to the women it kills. I desperately want to avoid such a fate, but I knew the odds of this gamble. All right, Apple Tart, do your magic. There's a loud grunt behind me, like a fish trying to bark. Heavy but quick footsteps rush to my back, and I can imagine the monster pulling back its good hand, ready to thrust it through my abdomen and rip out every last dripping organ. I'm hit. Thrown painfully to the ground with my ribs screaming in agony. I roll on the dry grass, crushing leaves and ferns and mushrooms. The uneven soil hurts as I plow through it with my body. There was no wet crack like broken bones, nor do I smell the warm copper of blood in the air. While it hurts like I've been run over by a car, this isn't like being stabbed. I'm familiar with that one. In fact, I'm back on my feet almost instantly, clutching a sore chest. This is going to bruise. A lot. But I'll be fine. Running would be inconvenient but possible, though ultimately futile. There it is, I say, hissing the sentence with a shallower breath than intended. It worked. My genius baking worked. I'll never know if Peter was bluffing about leaving me for the hunger demon to eat, but I doubt it. After what Agnes told me, I'd have been a fool to bet my life on his humanity. No. Peter saved me because I gave him no choice. Just like the Aquila is filled with people who gave themselves, body and soul, to Peter because he used their sadness, needs, and desires against them, he now belongs to me. Peter couldn't let me die because, against his better judgment, against his nature, and for a precious short amount of time, he's as infatuated with me as I've been with him, as we've all been. So he saved me. In what must have been the blink of an eye, my unwilling savior abandoned his human form and pushed me aside, narrowly preventing me from getting stabbed. The blow that was meant for me, a cruel stab of the hunger demon's hand, all 5 fingers clawing forward, ended up striking Peter's gut. It's an attack that would have pierced me from back to front, taking a handful of living flesh from my body in the process. But to Peter, it's nothing. Agnes wasn't kidding when she said that no matter how formidable she might have appeared, it paled in comparison to a fully hale and hearty Peter. Regret at allowing his perfect body to get damaged wells up in me. How dare I not lay down my life to avoid even a scratch to besmirch his flawless skin? He's no longer a demon in my eyes. His full power, unleashed, has made him a god. This is a creature of myth made flesh. Wings of thick, healthy leather float behind him, waving slowly to a wind that isn't there. His chest fills his shirt, pulling the fabric taut so I can see his muscle definition. His skin, already beautiful, is now a shade of cold purple that is as unnatural as it is irresistible. Horns almost 8 inches in length protrude from his forehead, curling back to follow his hair. The stench of rot is overpowered by the knee-buckling animal musk coming off of Peter. It makes expensive Fifth Avenue perfume smell like cheap eau de toilette you can get at a drugstore. It's liquid lust poured over him like a shower of desire. Above all the heart-pounding, loin-cramping effect this untethered version of Peter exudes, he also radiates power. If I was hoping that the hunger demon stood a chance against him, I'm fully cured of such a naive notion. Peter is going to cut it to shreds. The hunger demon senses its own demise in the air, but just like me, when cornered, it does what it knows to do best. Without hesitation, The decaying monster lurches its head forward and sinks its thick incisors into Peter's body, in the soft spot where the shoulder meets the neck. Peter screams in pain, but it's intermixed with a howl of pleasure. I'm no stranger to contradictions, but it's a disconcerting sound, accompanied by the frantic flapping of wings and the moist pulling of demon flesh by demon teeth. It's not a stalemate that lasts long. Though wounded, Peter has no problem bringing his own physiognomy to bear against his opponent. Black claws flash under the scarce light of the moon before coming down on the hunger demon. Thus begins a frantic exchange of blows. It's a series of transactions where violence is traded for blood and, too often for my sensibilities, flesh. More than once, I contemplate throwing myself into the fray, offering up my mortal body as a shield for Peter. It's an instinct born of lust and desire and guided by the unnatural pheromones of the incubus. Fortunately, reason and fear hold me back from such reckless and foolish behavior. The result is predictable. Peter walked into this fight with a definite advantage, and although the hunger demon got the first blow, it was a foregone conclusion that he would get the upper hand and get the better of his foe. Chest heaving and black blood covering his face, hands, and body, the incubus stands over the dismembered remains of my enemy from the last 10 months. Mortal weapons couldn't kill the hunger demon, but another creature from the same hell did. "Well played, Miriam." Peter's voice is pure and luminous, and the bruised throat and cracked teeth only add a missing ruggedness, increasing his appeal. "You know, you could have simply asked. It would have saved us both tremendous amounts of aggravation." With casual disregard, Peter flicks bits of rancid flesh from the tip of his claws. It's amazing how different he is in this form. Shirt ripped to free his wings and pants torn to allow for the double-jointed legs. Despite the changes, though, he's still recognizable as Peter. His perpetually apologetic eyes, an uneven, heart-melting smile. The wickedness of his nature is unmistakable, but horribly forgivable given his appearance and charm. He's the ultimate bad boy, with as much potential for evil as there is for pleasure. "However," he continues, closing the space between us, "you're starting to prove a lot more trouble than you're worth." The look in his eyes as the last sentence leaves his lips, accompanied by a flick of his tongue, is all I need to decide that the time has come for me to exit. Preferably on my own 2 legs. But what am I to a creature of preternatural speed? I haven't finished spinning on my legs, gritting my teeth against the pain in my ribs, before Peter's claws are already digging into my shoulder. "Miriam, please. Don't you want to know how I can make even your untimely passing be one of impossible ecstasy?" It's a rhetorical question. Of course I don't. I want to live. I want to be rid of demons. I want to be allowed the time to dig into the mysteries of Aquilo. I want the final leg of my plan to work, and I feared that it won't. Less than a minute passes while I wait for Peter to deliver on his threats and promises. His fingers twitch on my shoulders and I can hear the sound of flesh on flesh behind me. It's a struggle to keep my imagination from conjuring whatever it might be that Peter is doing, and all I can do is pray that it's over quickly. At long last, his grip tightens a little, then releases completely, leaving small puncture marks in my skin and blood blooming through the fabric of my shirt. The noise increases as I listen to Peter's breathing intensify before sinking low and losing its regularity. There are sounds of ripping and branches being cracked, but in the end it's a crushing silence that dominates the little clearing. Did I hear Peter try to speak for a second? Did I recognize the sound of meat being cut? Is there a subtle shift in the fragrance of honey and flowers? I'm terrified to turn and see for myself. too afraid to give myself such hope.
I could smell you from clear across town.
It's Agnes's voice. She sounds tired and as ragged as the edges of torn paper. I let out my breath, relieved that she's here, but not as relieved as I am that it's her voice and no longer Peter's that I hear. I knew you would, I whisper before I slowly look behind me. There she is. No different than the night she saved me from the hunger demon. Her pores look like they're drinking in the moonlight and shining it back tenfold through a lavender filter. Her golden eyes are set on me like a predator, eyeing a prey. I step back, nearly tripping over a branch. In her left hand, Agnes is holding her brother's wrist, twisting it back near the point of breaking. With her right hand, she's holding his neck, crushing his windpipe with her fingers and slicing through his flesh with her claws. A small geyser of black blood rushes out of Peter's mouth instead of the desperate plea he likely had in mind. His free arm jerks around like the legs of a dead spider. His wings flap a few more times, furiously at first, but soon with only a languid energy before going completely inert.
That was reckless, Miriam. He would have killed you.
But he didn't. I'm safe. Every facet of my plan worked, and now I get to taste the bloody results. Agnes keeps her chokehold on Peter for a while longer, even after he's gone completely limp, even after the blood that gushed from his wounds is gone still. When she's satisfied that he's dead, she lowers his body to the ground with a level of care sufficient to handle spun sugar. Better dead than back from whence they came, she told me. But that doesn't mean there's no room for grief. I couldn't let him force you to be something you aren't, I explain. It's too late, however. The truth of what I've done has already hit me.
I didn't want to be a killer, Miriam.
I knew that. I knew it, and I still used her to get rid of Peter. The same way I used Peter to get rid of the hunger demon. The same way Peter used the citizens of Aquilo to feed his lusts and needs. All my demon problems are taken care of in a single, messy, traumatizing event. But this doesn't feel like a victory. I'm sorry, I murmur, realizing how light the words feel compared to the weight of the situation. The tension between us is dense, and I'm trying to cut through it with a butter knife.
Sorry? You manipulated me into becoming everything I wanted to avoid. Why does everyone want me to be something I'm not?
I didn't know what else to do. That's my excuse. That's my confession. The very desperation that I prided myself as being the source of my inspiration backfired. It became the reason why I betrayed a friend. Everything that comes out of my mouth is weak, and Agnes can see right through it. Fortunately, her attention isn't on me anymore. I doubt I'll ever understand everything about Agnes's relationship with her brother. I'm not sure I want to. They come from a different place, somewhere for which I have no parallels to draw. But also, their relationship feels very familiar in a way that doesn't invite further inspection. The same hand, still coated in blood, strokes his hair. I suspect she mourns not who he was, but who he could have been. Or maybe just their shared origin.
You're hurt,
she says, looking up from Peter's body. I'll be fine. It's true. I've been through worse. Whatever wounds I have are painful but superficial. It's not the lacerations to my skin or the bruises to my bones that I worry about. Those will heal. It's the damage to who I thought I was, what I imagined I stood for, that suffered the hardest blow. When Olivia found us the next morning, Agnes was cradling me at the foot of a red maple tree. I can't remember many details, as seems to be the case with any and all intimate interactions with succubus and incubus. However, if I were to venture a guess, she held on to me while I slept, exhausted by events, and she grieved for her brother and the innocence she so desperately tried to preserve, the one I took away from her. By the time I woke up, she was gone. It took a few days before I saw her again. You left this for me? Agnes holds up an envelope, but I barely notice it. I'm familiar with the written invitation I left at her apartment after my calls went unanswered. It's her that I'm focusing on. Everything from the way she stands to where her eyes travel while she looks around the cafe's dining room. At a glance, everything looks like it's back to normal. Half the tables in the cafe are occupied and conversation has gone back to the usual chitter and chatter of Aquilo. Ian and his followers came in early for croissants, arguing about metaphysics or something. The mayors came in for morning coffee, and Mayor Byrne promised they'd stop by for lunch, making it the single most social interaction I've had with either elected official. Even Michael Valencia stopped in for breakfast. Though he didn't have a single spot of paint on his clothes, he was carrying a bag from the local art store. I hope this means he'll work on my painting while he finishes his convalescence. The busy morning heralds an even busier lunch, and I'm here for it. The last week has taken its toll on me, but I take a cue from the rest of the village and choose to move on. Not a word about Peter. Each citizen, including me, processing their individual relationship with the incubus on their own. I suspect those close to each other find comfort in more private conversations, but otherwise the whole of Aquilo would rather forget. That is, until Agnes. I did. It's hard to hide my enthusiasm. I've been longing to see her again ever since she killed her brother to save me. It's a little selfish, but for the most part, I want to know that she's surviving. I want to apologize. I acted without thinking, and what? I've gone through this apology 1,000,000 times in my head, usually lying in bed and counting the shadows on the ceiling of Doris's bedroom. How does one apologize for putting someone through their worst nightmare?
It's okay,
she says, making her way to the counter and sitting next to Gulliver.
I mean, it's not okay, but how else was it going to go down?
How else indeed? Was Peter beyond reform? Could someone else have carried the deed instead? Like a well-trained dog, I go through the motions and prepare a glass of iced coffee with unhealthy amounts of sugar and syrup mixed in. Then I top it with an obnoxious tower of whipped cream before sliding the drink in front of Agnes. And that's when I noticed the bag. Brand new and without a speck of dust on it, it still has tags attached. It's the kind of bag one buys when they want to live out the cliché of backpacking through Europe and finding themselves. I know because I've contemplated that scenario more than once in my life. Are you... I hesitate. Are you going somewhere? She smiles. It's no longer the shy, pained smile of a girl living under her demon brother's shadow. This is the radiant smile of Agnes as I think she's meant to be. The notion is a little scary. This kind of bright joy and, dare I say, hope, whispers of the succubus having perhaps fallen to her darker urges.
I am,
she says after taking a deep sip from her glass.
I think I've picked my road to go down.
My ribs hurt again. It's like I've been punched in the gut. Leaving? But we have so much to talk about. I've been poring over recipes, trying to come up with some combination of flavors and magic to sate her needs without anyone getting hurt. I need time to make things right with her. She has to stay. She has to stay and forgive me. Do you have to go? I ask, half whimpering.
I can't stay at the crossroads if I want to explore one of the paths.
Her smile turns to Gulliver, and her hand goes over and squeezes his for a moment. Where are you going? Are you leaving today? I haven't heard my voice be that desperate since Trevor left me. I'd bought in so hard to his promises of giving us another chance and not throwing away what we had. In hindsight, it was pathetic, and I hated myself for it. This is a cake of a different flavor.
Heading down to New York, then I'll be on a bus to California. Figure things out from there.
That's not a plan. I want to scream at her to reconsider, to stay for a little while longer. Let me figure something out. A recipe, or maybe a better itinerary that'll be safer for her. Or maybe we can pick a different destination, somewhere she can thrive. Somewhere like Aquilo. But that's just me being selfish. That's a long trip, I say, straightening my back and lifting my chin. Can I pack you a few things to eat on the way? Assuming you've got room in that bag. She nods, and her golden eyes soften with gratitude. Not for the food, but for letting her go without further resistance. I turn to grab whatever snacks I might have that she would like. Sugary treats, of course, and anything with a high caloric content. Mostly, I turn so that I can shed a few tears without Agnes and Gulliver noticing. Here you go, I say, still a little puffy-eyed. Eat the ones in this container first. They won't keep as long. The other ones are baklava and are going to stay good practically forever. I can also make you a thermos of... What's this? Agnes didn't just buy herself a bag for her travels. On the counter, next to her empty glass of iced coffee, sits a wooden spoon. It too still has a tag with a barcode glued to the handle. This isn't one of the characterful spoons of my predecessors. It's not hand-sculpted, oddly shaped, or even worn by having sat in boiling water for countless hours. There are no scorch marks at its tip, and its angles have yet to be dulled. Even by modern standards, it's nothing special. No heat-proof silicone handle or fancy ergonomic shapes. It's just a standard wooden spoon.
I know you probably have dozens of these in the kitchen,
Agnes explains.
Better ones too, but I thought maybe you needed a replacement for the one that got broken.
My fingers first stroke the handle gently, avoiding the barcode sticker. Then I pick it up, feeling its weight. I've held many spoons just like this one, probably some from the exact same manufacturer. Still, this one feels a little heavier. It's perfect. I choke out the words. Thank you. Agnes packs the plastic containers I gave her into her brand new bag. I can see a few other purchases in there, pieces of clothing and toiletries.
I should go,
she says, her smile faltering a little.
I don't want to miss my bus.
Then she lifts herself to kneel on her stool and leans in towards me. Tiny arms with strength enough for half a dozen men pull me into a tight embrace. It's painful and uncomfortable, the countertop pressing into my thighs and our uneven height pulling my spine at an odd angle, but I want it to last forever. Long enough for everything that remains between us to be obliterated. Finally, after too short an eternity, she pulls away, looks me in the eyes, and kisses my forehead. What an odd scene this must have been for the rest of the Aquilo crowd. Yet no one makes a fuss. No one says a word. Some even avert their eyes. Without further ceremony, and without casting a glance behind, Agnes walks out of the Aquilo Cafe and out of my life. It takes a second for the sound of the dining room to return to my ears. I can still feel the touch of her lips above my brow, filling me with warm energy, like she gave instead of taking. "I'm gonna miss her," Gulliver says with a smile. He looks like a proud older brother watching his little sister going off to college. I wonder how things would have been if it were him, instead of Peter, who'd been Agnes's sibling. I lean on the counter and reach a hand to put over his, mimicking Agnes's prior act. Me too.
Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You have no idea how much it helps. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Visit ko-fi.com/aquilo to donate a cup. Questions? Comments? Email us at aquilo@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.